Wes Goldberg, cold open question of the day for you here on the Just Basketball Show. Vince Carter, obviously been retired for a bit now. He's going to get his jersey retired by both the Nets and the Raptors this year. So I ask you, as someone who's not, a Nets or a Raptors fan, just general NBA guy in some ways in this way, but, not from those regions where he played, which team do you remember Vince Carter from? Well, it's like, what jersey do you picture him in your head?
I picture Vince Carter personally as a Sacramento King. But no. So that was actually the one time I actually got a chance to deal with him as a media member. I was living in the Bay Area and he was in Sacramento, and I'm like, "Why are you on this team exactly? You're 40 years old or whatever."
At age 41, do you know how many games he started? I'm looking this up right now.
Started. I didn't even realize he started. I don't know, 16.
4. Four is a lot, if I'm being honest.
Right, yeah.
17 minutes a game, played 58 games a year, started 4 games. That's crazy.
Yeah, that Sacramento Kings team was like gung-ho on like having the veteran experience. We don't have to talk about the Kings. No, to answer your question, I remember him as a Toronto Raptor. I understand some people that want to remember him or do remember him as a New Jersey Net, a bigger market than Toronto, especially at the time, but he's a Toronto Raptor, man. The iconic dunk. I mean, the Raptors based their City Edition jerseys off of his silhouette on that dunk this year. So, yeah, for me, he's a Toronto Raptor. What about you?
I think it's the Nets, but it's just the timing thing. Yeah. I mean, I think the when I think of an image or a clip of Vince, it's the Olympic dunk on Frederick Weiss, or it's the dunk contest. Like, those are the two. But when I think about watching Vince Carter, his first full year with the New Jersey Nets, his age 29 season, is 2005-2006. I was 12 years old, 13 years old, and I went from 13 right around the end of that year. At the end of that season and into June of that year. That is like prime, like you're getting consumed by the league and it sticks with you time. Like you remember everything. At least for me, it's like those are the years that really click a lot into place. And I just remember watching him, Jay Kidd, Richard Jefferson, and just those teams had no shot, against San Antonio and whatnot in the finals. But I think of him as a Net just because of timing. I think the Raptors is like the objectively pure, correct answer. But for me in my head, it's like I picture him wearing number 15 for the Nets.
Yeah, so I think it does come out to like how old you are too, right? Like for me, my formative NBA years were 2000 to like that 2005-ish kind of range. Like everything that happened those years kind of set in motion everything I think about basketball, right? And Vince Carter was obviously part of the Toronto Raptors for most of that time. What's weird is that I had to double check like that the New Jersey stint didn't come before the Toronto stint, because obviously the New Jersey Nets don't exist anymore. They're the Brooklyn Nets, and the Toronto Raptors do exist. So I'm like, that New Jersey, like picturing Vince Carter in that New Jersey Nets jersey just feels older than when he was in that Toronto jersey, for me at least, point. Just because that franchise doesn't exist in the same way. But yeah, it just depends on when you were born. I mean, there's some people might remember like the big move when he went to Orlando too. Like that was a really big deal at the time. And so if you're maybe a little bit younger than we are and based in the Southeast somewhere, maybe you think about Vince Carter as an Orlando Magic player. But Toronto, New Jersey, those were the prime Vince Carter years. I don't think there is a wrong answer. For me, it's Toronto. For you, it's New Jersey.
Yeah, I think it's just after that, it just gets weird. And if you're like a Suns fan in 2010 and you remember him that way, like that's cool for you. If you're a Dallas fan who remembers like 35-year-old Vince,
least forgettable, I'm sorry, most forgettable stint for Vince Carter.
It's probably Atlanta at the end.
Yeah,
it's that or the Kings. It's like because I remember him in Memphis and stuff. So
it's for most people, it's probably Sacramento, but not for this media guy.
Not for you, who was like that was my plug into Vince was him there.
When I really learned to appreciate Vince Carter, he was 41 years old and playing in Sacramento.
Shot 34% from 3 that year.
Great locker room addition, though.
I wonder if you had told him at 22 that he would play till he's 43, if he'd believe you, and that he'd reinvent himself in a lot of ways. Like, it's just such a fascinating career. I would read a really good book about Vince Carter.
The thing is, he's a lock as a Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
And you could argue that he shouldn't be, but I won't. I would not for the Vince Carter stands. I'm absolutely not doing it. You could make a rather easy argument that he shouldn't be, but that's neither here or there. Congrats to Vince Carter. 2 jersey retirements in 1 week. Or at least they are announced. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, still anti-jersey tournament, but that's cool. All right, on today's show, we've got West over-unders. That's coming up today on the Just Basketball Show. Hey there, welcome to the Just Basketball Show, your twice-weekly show covering all things hoops. I'm Chris Manning. That's Wes Goldberg. If you haven't already, follow, rate, review on your podcast app platform of choice. Hit subscribe on the Just Basketball Fans YouTube channel. And check us out on TikTok, Instagram, and X. Want to tell you, too, that support for today's episode of the Just Basketball Show comes from BetMGM. If you haven't set up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code JustBasketball and you get up to $1,500 on a first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. Here is how that works. Step 1, download the BetMGM Sportsbook app on iOS or Android and sign up using code JustBasketball. Step 2, deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game. Step 3, you receive up to $1,500 back in bonus bets if the bet loses. Just make sure to use our bonus code JustBasketball when you sign up. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Must be 21 or older to wager. Terms and conditions apply. Again, that promo code is JustBasketball. Best way for you to support the show, aside from subscribing, giving us a 5-star review, is to go to BetMGM, use that bonus code, and let them know that we brought you there. Over-unders, alphabetical order. We're going to do 3 to 4 minutes on every team here. Western Conference versus East coming up shortly. Wes, I've started the stopwatch. Dallas Mavericks. These all odds all via BetMGM. 49.5. The over is at -120. The under is at +100. Where do you stand on this? Are you into this in any way? Are you a push on it? Where are you at on this?
So I'm going to go over on Dallas, and I feel pretty good about it. They won, 50 games last year, and now they're at 49.5 on this over-under. And now they get a full year of Daniel Gafford, a full year of PJ Washington, Kyrie Irving, and Luka Doncic have really hammered out their chemistry. And I think they're going to get a leap from Derek Lively the second in his second year. And there's going to be a little bit of fuel coming off of that NBA Finals run, right? Like there's confidence in proof of concept, and I think they're going to have that. And I think they're going to take the regular season by storm. So I like them a lot. I feel pretty good about them hitting the over. What about you?
Yeah, last year expected win total of a 47.4 win team in over an 82-game season. I agree with you. All the points you made, I think, lead me to think the over. I think of them kind of weirdly, Wes, in the sense that I think there's a chance this is a worse title contending team. Like, I think their chance of winning a title is they're probably not going to make the finals again. I don't see Dallas in the finals. I do see them as being like a 52-53 win team. Like, I think it's just going to be the West is so loaded that I think they could have a better year in terms of wins and be a really good team. And yet I won't pick them to make the finals.
Yeah, like that's a little bit of a different question, right? Is picking them to make the finals.
Sure.
But here's the thing. I mean, before we even get into all this stuff, the West, in terms of having, I was trying to figure out, like, kind of going through this, how many teams do I think are going to have 50 or more wins in the Western Conference in general?
Yeah.
And then sort of reverse engineering it from there. 5 teams had 50 plus wins in the West last year. 2 teams had 50 plus wins the year before that, but it was 4 teams with 50 plus wins 3 years ago. In the 2021-2022 season. That 23 year, where there was only 2 50-plus win teams, was kind of a wonky year. It was a down Warriors season. It was a down Grizzlies season. The Lakers weren't quite right. The Clippers were dealing with a bunch of injuries. The Mavericks were kind of reeling after Jalen Brunson left, and they kind of tanked at the end of the year. Like, there just wasn't a lot of good stuff happening in the Western Conference. I tend to think 4 to 5 50-plus win teams make sense in the West, even as crowded with good teams as it is. So I ended up, spoiler alert, with 5 teams with 50-plus wins. Dallas was one of them.
Yeah, I think they're there. I think Luka. We're going to do awards odds next week. Luka as an MVP, to me, is just one of my favorite things I'm thinking about. I think it's very possible this is like a Luka MVP, or if he's that
he got
good,
snubbed last year. So that's a good bet this year.
Him and Shea are like, and I know Shea, I think is the betting, might be like, he's very near the top in the betting favorites last time I looked, but like it's one of those two guys I think I'm kind of zeroing in on this year a couple months ago. So we're both over on Dallas. Next one, Wes, I think for me, this is the first one when I was prepping for this that made me scared. I think as if I were to bet these This is not one I feel great about either way. It's the Denver Nuggets, 51.5 wins. Over's at minus 105. The under is at minus 115. Where do you stand?
This was a tough one, but the Nuggets have cleared this 2 of the last 3 years.
And they have Jokic. Like, they
Sorry?
have Jokic. Like,
They have Jokic.
Like, Jokic is just like, you're going to get 50-plus wins. You're going to be in the range of this with him.
Yeah, I'm going over. I think a lot of people will go the under because there's sort of bad vibes about the Nuggets with the way that they let the Kentavious Caldwell-Pope situation play out. The fact that they replaced him with Russell Westbrook, who is not a betting man's favorite player in the NBA, right? People tend to short Russell Westbrook, rightly or wrongly. But they still have Jokic. They're still, even with Jokic, Michael Porter Jr., Jamal Murray, Aaron Gordon, having that core 4 on the floor is still just that's still a really good starting 5. And I think they'll figure out one other starter, whether it's Christian Brown or Strawther or whoever it's going to be. I think they're going to figure it out. I'll go over Denver 51.5.
I'm going to go over as well. I lean over. I think 57 wins for them a year ago. Even if you lose KCP, is KCP a 5.5 loss win guy? I think he was impactful for them. I don't think like you subtract him and you're immediately losing that many more games. I think Murray's a big X factor. If Murray has a weird year and, Christian Brown doesn't, like, if certain little things don't click, I think they could still be like a 50-win team. I think that's entirely plausible that they win like 50 and that's where they end up. But I would lean over it comes back to Jokic. And if you have that guy, you have the best player in the world, you kind of still have a way to get 52, 53, even if things are imperfect.
Yeah, you kind of have to talk yourself into them going under, where it feels like it's easier to just kind of get the feel for it and go over on 51.5 because they have Jokic, because Jamal Murray, Jokic is 29, Jamal Murray is 27, Aaron Gordon's 26, 27, whatever it is, or 29, or I forget, wherever he is. He's in his 20s. Michael Porter Jr. is 26. I think there's Michael Malone, by the way, awesome coach.
Yes.
And there's enough championship infrastructure here. I would feel really dumb kind of going under on Denver and then them clearing the over with like a month left to go in the season. It feels like that's totally possible.
Sure.
So I'm going over on Denver, and if I'm wrong about it, then I'm wrong about it, and I'm okay being wrong with it.
Next one up, the Golden State Warriors, Wes. They are at 44.5 wins. The over is at plus 100. The under is at minus 120. 46 wins a year ago for Golden State. Obviously, Klay Thompson leaves in the summer. And haven't added a ton. The guy Buddy Hield, but, nothing that makes you totally, I think, feel super confident about them. We've been, I think, somewhat pessimistic about their title chances here when we've talked about it on the show. Where are you at on them as an over-under team?
So their title chances are 0. Like, this team is not going to win the championship as currently constructed, right? They might have a trade down the road, maybe January, February before the deadline, but as this roster has a championship odds of 0. Like, it's not happening. That said, I think their floor is higher than it was last year, even if their ceiling is a little bit lower. I like some of the stuff they did in the offseason. I like adding DeAnthony Melton, Buddy Hield, Kyle Anderson. Like, this roster does just make a little bit more sense now. And without the drama of Klay Thompson's decline, without some of the injuries that they were dealing with at various times of last season, like, they'll still get hurt because they are a little bit of an older team. But I kind of feel like they figured out who they are. Whether or not it's Trace Jackson Davis starting at the 5, or maybe they go full small ball at center with Draymond Green, or whatever it is, it just feels like they know who they are now. They've rediscovered their identity that they needed to find. And so the only bit of drama that can kind of mess things up is Jonathan Kuminga in a contract year. But if anything, he should be motivated to play even better, which would only push this win total up a little bit. So if the over-under is at 44.5, they won 46 games last year in a pretty bad year for them. Qualitatively, I have them going over.
I'm gonna bet them the over. I'm gonna do about 5 over-unders out of this. That I think what we'll do on TikTok and Instagram and stuff is I'll track these throughout the year. Do some over-unders, put a unit or two on all of them. There's an East team I've done an alt over on already that I feel really good about. We'll get to that when we get to the East. But Golden State as like a value bet, Wes, at plus 100. It's obviously not the longest odds in the world. You can't throw 5 and get a ton back.
Right.
But this is like a value bet on what you're saying. It's like no Clay drama. That energy doesn't suck things dry there. Doesn't just drain the energy out of Golden State. You added some useful players, and you still have Steph Curry, you still have Draymond Green, you still have Steve Kerr. Like 46 last year for them amid all that was still the 10th seed. It's not like we're saying they go over and they're suddenly a 50-win team.
Right.
46, 47, which is mathematically what they were last year as well, with maybe just being more functional without Clay. I know that's not fun to say, but like Buddy Hield, D'Anthony Melton, Kyle Anderson, those guys getting those minutes and having some more alternatives in there is maybe you're just more functional. I like the over here is why I like the over bet on Golden State.
Yeah, I really like it. And look, I mean, D'Anthony Melton hasn't been the most healthy player, but between him and Gary Payton II, like one of those defensive-minded guards have to be available for whatever 90% of the games, 80% of the games. Like, there's an interesting lineup there with Steph. Maybe it's Buddy Hield, Kuminga, Wiggins, maybe Pods is in there somewhere, or Green. I don't know. Or if Wiggins isn't any good, like Kyle Anderson now is an option there where they didn't really have that guy. They haven't had that guy who could basically replace those minutes since Otto Porter Jr. left, and obviously they won a championship when he had that good year for them. I don't know. I think there's just more utility with the lineups. I think Steve Kerr's got more options, more tools in the toolbox, more crayons in the coloring box. Like there's just different things that he can use. Steve Kerr tends to do well when he has those kinds of options. It does tend to also take him a little while to figure it out. I think that's going to be the case again. But I like the Warriors floor more than I did last year. So you and I agree over on Golden State.
We're in alignment overall so far and very positive.
That's true.
So far.
Wow.
So
okay.
Let's
3 overs. See what happens now.
I'm telling you right now, I'm going under on the Houston Rockets. Not because I don't believe in the Houston Rockets totally as a team and don't like a lot of what they're doing, but 43.5 over is at -115, under is -105. I'm a slight under 41 win team last year. I think there's some identity stuff to figure out with them with, the way they played small ball 5 at the end of the year when Sengun was out. Sengun, I think, is still their most interesting player in a lot of ways. Had the expected win total of a 46-win team last year, the expected net rating of a 46-win team last year. This is kind of maybe looking at the numbers and saying, hey, like you got unlucky last year, and I kind of believe some of the unluck was more than just numbers noise. I just lean a slight under on them, West, is where I end up with Houston, just because I think there's still a lot to figure out there. They didn't really add anything big in the offseason, and a lot of young guys still to come forward and figure out minutes for, so I go under.
I'm definitely going under on this.
Okay,
and
look, we're two in agreement. I need to swerve
I know.
somewhere. I need to swerve somewhere during here.
Maybe the next one, but look, they won. They went on a real run at the end of last season, an 11 game win streak. They had won like 13 out of 14 at one point in March. If they don't go on that big run, they're way under 41 wins, and they're definitely way under the 43.5 mark here. And you already said it, Chris. Like they didn't make any real big additions in the offseason. It seemed like they wanted to, but they just that player wasn't really out there. Their biggest thing was sort of getting those Phoenix Suns picks, and maybe there's a trade down the line, but it doesn't really feel like that's going to happen this season for them. So yeah, I'm going under, and they're going to be, I think, an NBA Twitter favorite to say, oh, they're going to make the playoffs or whatever. Like they could still make the play-in tournament at 42 wins. Like I don't know, I'm not going to rule it out, but I feel pretty good about going under on Houston right now. I like their long-term outlook. I just don't think they did enough this season to go to increase, another 3 or 4 wins in what's going to be a more difficult Western Conference, I think.
The one team I will say that is not going to make this a harder Western Conference is the LA Clippers post Paul George. They are up next, 40.5 wins. Over is at -105. The under is at -115. Wes, I got to tell you, if I was making a power ranking of bets that I'm staying the fuck away from, the Clippers are number one on those. I'm staying. I want nothing to do with this. I am scared of, I don't know for that. We should note a 10.5 win drop off from where they won 51 games last year. Their over under is 10.5 wins under where they were a year ago. And I would still think totally about the under, if I'm being honest. I haven't made my pick yet. I want to hear what you say, but I'm thinking about the under.
So here's the question there's really 2 questions. The first one, I suppose, would be how many wins does this roster get if you just take Kawhi Leonard off the roster and it's just James Harden running pick and roll with Zubac, with some of the spacing and the guys they have? I think that could still be a functional roster. Is that a 30-win team? if it's just James Harden, no Kawhi for all 82 games?
Sure. I'm looking at
Lower?
Harden.
Like less?
The role guys that you just don't like, you don't love. Like it's like Norm Powell and like they're trying to rebuild like
Right.
Kevin Porter Jr. It's like a lot of like roll guys. Harden for what it's worth. If you go to his entire career, obviously started in, really excellent circumstances for himself. It's just like he had one 500 year in Houston, and every other year it's like he's a wins machine pretty much when he plays. Like his teams win a lot of games.
I mean, and he's not that player anymore. But
No,
I do think there is something to be said. Like James Harden he's not a system player. He is the system.
Sure.
To quote James Harden, there's some truth to that, right? Like, okay, James Harden's here. I know I can just run pick and roll every single play, and I'm probably going to get a decent looking shot most possessions. And there's a lot of value in that. So that's the first part. The second question is, how many games do we think Kawhi Leonard needs to play for them to hit that 40.5? Because the other thing about James Harden is he tends to be available, right? Like there's a lot of knocks on James Harden. The one thing that you can't really, the guy shows up for his innings. Kawhi, obviously, that's the major thing. I think if you get 50 games out of Kawhi, 55 games out of Kawhi, I think the Clippers go over this because I think James Harden will do enough in the games that Kawhi is not involved in to make sure that they're close to 40.5. So I'm with you. This is the hardest bet on the board. I reluctantly went over, and I hate that I did it, but it just feels like it'd be really hard for this team to not even win 40 games.
I'm going to go under just for the sake of us being different and like me picking against Ty Lue and against the Hardens that we talked about and against like just rooting for Kawhi to be really good, which is something that makes our basketball lives better. That doesn't feel totally right to me, but this is, I mean, in terms of actual units thrown down in anything, staying the hell away. I would not. This is, again, number one. I'm not touching this, but
You have a problem if you bet on this. You have a gambling problem if you bet on this.
Call 1-800-GAMBLER.
Right.
There's just they are the team that just has the most like volatile outcomes, like range of outcomes this year where like you could tell me X happens or Y happens. Like I don't think there's like a situation where they win the title, but like just about like anything else, I'd be like, sure, whatever. I could see this happening.
You remember my 2 rules, right?
No, don't trust the Clippers.
Right.
That's what's the other one?
Don't watch the Hornets after February.
Yeah, you could bump it up. It's true. All right, next other team across the LA Lakers. 43.5 wins. Over is 105. The under is -115. This was a 47-win team a year ago, which outperformed their expected win total by by a little less than 2 games, according to Clean in the Glass. Wes, where are you at on the Lakers?
So you mentioned 47 wins last year. There were 43 wins the year before that. So at 43.5, that feels like it's about right in terms of setting the over-under. I'm going over. I think that the Lakers this is a little bit of a bet on LeBron and Anthony Davis being as healthy as they were in the regular season last year, and maybe I'm just like still high on the fumes of LeBron James and that Olympic run, and even Anthony Davis, who was awesome during that Olympic run. So there might be a little bit of that, but I also think that there's going to be like renewed pep in the step with LeBron James sort of getting his guy, JJ Redick, as head coach. I think this team is going to enjoy, even if they're not functionally better, I think they'll enjoy playing basketball more under JJ Redick than they did Darvin Ham. I think that everybody will enjoy more 3-pointers. Everybody will enjoy whatever it is that Redick brings to the table. I think so. That's a little bit of the bet is sort of that new coach syndrome. So I'm going over. I'm going over at 43.5.
I lean over as well. It's another one that I'm again a little bit scared about, but I just have a hard time, even if this team isn't a title contender, I have a hard time imagining a LeBron team doesn't win at least 44 games. In particular, I have a hard time imagining a LeBron James, Anthony Davis team, even with where how old LeBron is, doesn't win at least like 44 games. I just can't see it.
Yep.
Next one, Memphis Grizzlies. 47.5. Overs at -110. Unders at this is even. And Wes, I'm just going to come out and say this one. I'm going over. Memphis Grizzlies have been a win machine when Ja Morant plays. This team just wins games. I have concerns about this team in terms of what it's actually going to look like. A lot to figure out, I think, with Marcus Smart and Ja coming back. And I think there's like a learning curve to come here for this team. But in the Taylor Jenkins, Ja Morant era, when this team has had Ja Morant, they win a ton of regular season games. So I'm going to go with the over.
So this is going to be a very popular pick. People are going to be taking Memphis on the over. I already can see it on ESPN. People acting like this is a really hot take. It's not. Like, this team is going over 47.5 wins. This team is going over.
I thought you're going to swerve on me and be like, I'm
set
a
it
hater.
Up that way, didn't I?
44, like, playing tournament. I thought that's where you were going.
This is my third team to win 50 games. Okay. Look, I think there's a fair question about, okay, is Ja Morant back, right? Like, what he just dealt with is weird. Like, that's hard to come back from. All the off-court stuff, the injuries, all these things. Like, just assuming that he's going to be back to what he was, I don't think we can assume that. That said, I'm willing to bet on it, right? Like, that's what this comes down to. I'm willing to bet on it. And he looked good last year when he was available. So I like the roster. I like Zach Edey quite a bit for this roster too. I think that's going to replace a little bit of what they lost in Steven Adams a couple of years ago. Jaren Jackson will be back. Eventually, I think they'll get Brandon Clark back. You're basically, the biggest difference between this team and the team that was winning 50 games all the time was Dylan Brooks is out, but Marcus Smart is in, and you can argue that might even be a better fit for them. They don't have Tyus Jones, which is that's tough for them. So Ja Morant needs to stay healthy. Because the other part about Ja Morant is he tends not to always be healthy during the regular season. So if he's out, what do they do? Well, that's where Marcus Smart comes in. Maybe he can run point for you, and you could still have a little bit of a table setter there and figure things out. Desmond Bane will be back. He wasn't there last year. He wasn't healthy last year. So as long as everybody's back and relatively healthy, I think this is a lock for more than 47.5 wins. I feel good about them getting up to 50. So you and I agree on Memphis.
Yeah, they're just, I want to believe. I want to be excited about them. It's like, I think that's one of the things in the league this year. Everyone's going to be, to some degree, rooting for Memphis, I think, to like figure it out and be fun and interesting.
And I think their defense will be back to like top 10 level too.
Yeah, Brandon Clark being a question mark kind of scares me a little bit, but we'll see kind of what happens with that.
There's enough of infrastructure there. Taylor Jenkins is a great coach. I don't know. I believe in Memphis. I think they're going to also want to come out and be like, yeah, everybody forgot about us, but we're still here. And I think that energy should help them too.
Yes. All right, let's go to the Minnesota Timberwolves up next. Okay. 52.5 wins. Over is at -105. Under is at -115. This is another one, Wes, that makes me a little bit nervous just because the Wolves have a lot of guys at a certain age spectrum. Mike Conley's older, Rudy Gobert's older, and he was banged up or at least didn't play well at the Olympics. 56 wins a year ago. Are we sure there isn't some regression coming here? I mean, you could get better from Jaden and stuff. This was a 58-win team by the numbers last year. This is probably one that I think over is the right call here. But I could see this being like a 50-win team and it being slightly under. But I think, are they 4 wins worse? I'm gonna go over.
Yeah, I'm going over here too. This is my fourth 50-win team, and I feel pretty good about this. Look, yeah, they had a great year last year. I kind of expected them to have a great year last year. Like when they finished the season with 56 wins, I was like, yep, that's kind of what I projected. This was the best defense in the league by a mile last season. I think they're going to be one of the top 2 defenses again in the league this season. And between that and Karl-Anthony Towns' ability to just produce points in the regular season, Anthony Edwards taking another leap in the playoffs last year and then in the Olympics, and I think he's just only going to be better in this regular season than he was last regular season. There's a lot to like here. Now, I do have concerns about their depth at point guard, right? Is Rob Dillingham ready to kind of assume some backup point guard responsibilities? I don't know. They lose Kyle Anderson. That's a big loss in their rotation and all these things. But I think the rest of the roster, there's just enough internal improvement. There's enough of an infrastructure. There's just enough everything to feel good about them going over 52.5 wins, even if you don't maybe believe in them as a contender or their ceiling or whatever, which I still do because I still have Anthony Edwards. But yeah, 52.5 wins. I feel pretty good about them hitting the over, right? Like, yeah, there's just a foundation here for winning basketball. Yeah. This is a team that's probably going to be top 2 in defense and could arguably be top like they could have a top 10 offense next year with how
Yeah.
efficient some of that stuff is. So I don't know. I think this is another sort of regular season wins machine.
West is really good. Is my other takeaway from us going through this. We already knew this, but I think we know how good the West is. And a team West that
on that to that point, I think there was 4 bad teams in the West last year. I think there's only 2 this year.
Yeah, when we did our tiers, it feels like there's 2, and I think there's one team we'll get to that I think they're under makes a lot of sense to me if I think about it logically, even if I think they're going to be better this year. But we can get them when we get there.
Yeah, I mean, like to the point though, like it's interesting that we're still picking some of these teams to go over 50 wins. So we still think the elite teams are the elite teams, right? We still think the elite teams will stack wins, but it might be some of these other teams in that like kind of middle class region, like what we're talking about, the Lakers and the Clippers and the Rockets. Like we're like, these are the ones that it's harder to figure out because those are the teams that tend to kind of grab wins against lesser competition. And there's just half as much of the bad teams now as there were last year. But let's go ahead.
Yeah, and I also too, I think we don't know how these are really going to, like some of in the tiers that we think exist. I think there's going to be some tier movement this year that we don't see coming, or at least like get wrong.
Of course, yeah.
And I think the stacking of how these teams actually stack up is going to be like a little different than we kind of envision right now. Memphis being like a potential wild card. Another team West that could be a wild card. New Orleans Pelicans, 46.5 wins. The over is at plus 100. The under is at minus 120. It's a 49-win team a year ago with an expected win total of 51.8. So basically a 52-win team by the numbers last year. And I don't think they're getting 50 wins, but I think I'm going the over on the New Orleans Pelicans as a bet. I'm a little bit, I'm tantalized by the Pelicans. I can't tell you why. Exactly. There's something about them that I'm just really fascinated by, even with the roster concerns at center. Murray and Zion and Herb Jones and Trey Murphy taking a step forward, even with his Ingram thing hanging over them. I think there is like a 48, 49 win team in there, and I want to believe. I want to believe the New Orleans Pelicans. So give me the over.
This is our first real disagreement.
Yeah, I look. I don't even love myself for picking the over here. I think the under is the favorite for a reason here, right? Like it's minus 120 for a reason.
I'm going the under, and I feel really strongly about it. 46.5 wins for a team without a center. Who plays center for this team?
I don't know.
Daniel Tice?
Yeah,
I like Yves Missy, their draft pick, just fine. He's like, we all agreed he was pretty raw coming into the draft. I like his upside, but I don't like him to be a day one starter. You've got the Brandon Ingram weirdness kind of hovering over this team. It felt a little bit like I love so many players on this roster. Do not get me wrong. Like I am a huge Herb Jones, Trey Murphy fan. I still like myself some CJ McCollum every once in a while. Like I have, but I don't love the DeJounte Murray acquisition for them. I still think that there's some fit concerns there. And the biggest thing to me, not to bury the lead here, Zion played 70 games last year.
Yeah,
the most by far of his career.
Yeah.
Are we sure he's going to play another 70 games? If he plays just 60 games, I think there's a really strong argument to me that there's no way the Pelicans can reach 46.5 wins. So I'm going under here, and I feel pretty good about it.
I think I'm going to throw half a unit on this in the over and ride it out. I think that's where I'm going. I don't know. I'm just trying to
find value where you can. Yeah.
Yeah, look, and the Zion downside, the vibes downside, the no center. Like there are lots of obvious downsides. There's just like something in there that has never been fully realized. And I'm not saying it's going to be fully realized this year. I just think there's something there that I think could really work.
Yeah, I mean there is an upside play here. Like if you wanted the value pick, definitely go the over, right? Like maybe Zion is just healthy all of a sudden. Look, he looks great in these pictures on Instagram and stuff right now. So
does Ben Simmons, though. It's like I don't really believe any. Can I be honest, Wes? I have a rule for you. You have your two.
Don't believe in Instagram lab photos.
If I see an NBA player do something on Instagram, you cannot take it as he act like I see Rudy Gobert hitting threes and gyms on Instagram. That's different. That doesn't mean shit.
That's a little bit different than a guy just looking slimmer.
Sure. Okay, that's true. That's fair.
You know what I mean? Like Zion's biggest problem is that he has too much weight on those knees and those ankles and stuff like that. And if that's not as much of a concern anymore. That said, this team, the other upside play here is that this team does acquire a center at some point. And if they do that, then I feel pretty good about the over. I just don't know who's playing center. And if the answer is Zion Williamson, I don't love that either. Yeah. Right? Because now you're banging bodies against bigger players, and that's more wear and tear. And then there's no way he's playing 70+ games this year. So we'll see. It's a fine upside play, but as the team is currently constructed, I'm going under.
Oklahoma City Thunder up next. They're at 56.5. I think everyone's presumptive favorite in the Western Conference.
Yep.
Wes, 60 plus wins is a lot, and yet that's where I think this team is going. They won 57 last year. You expect a lot of their young guys all really to still take steps forward. J-Dub, Chet in particular. I think Shea, obviously an MVP candidate, and they added Isaiah Hartenstein and they added Alex Caruso. They still have Lou Dort. They still have Wiggins. This team is loaded with good role players. They have a good coach. They have a lot of ascending young players. Barring something catastrophic, I would be blown away if they don't win more than 56.5.
Blown away is pretty strong language. I mean, since 2021, only 3 teams in the West have won 57 games. It's a high mark to reach in a really tough conference. And the Thunder were as healthy as anybody in the league last year.
Sure, that's a good point.
And it just feels like the shoe's got to drop on that. Like, doesn't Shea pull a hamstring and he's out for a week and a half? Doesn't that feel like it's got to happen at some point in this guy's career?
Aren't they the team with J-Dub if he ascends and Chet adding? Aren't they kind of the team that could absorb like 2 weeks without Shea, though? That's kind of the thing.
So I think they can. So Chet also played 82 games last year, just his injury history. Yeah. So I have no reason to think that Jalen Williams was going to miss a lot of games, but I do agree with your point. Maybe not a Shea injury necessarily, although depending on if Jalen Williams sort of ascends into an advantage creator on offense for them, maybe they can. But it feels like they can sustain like a Chet injury or a Jalen injury at any given point, because if Chet gets hurt, they can go big with Isaiah Hartenstein and still have plenty of spacing around him because they still have Shea. As long as everybody other than Shea, as long as they have Shea, I think 1 or 2 pieces can get hurt and they could just keep winning basketball games. It's a high watermark. I really wanted to take the under on them because I'm like, man, are we too in love with the Thunder? I couldn't get there, man. I still went over on OKC, 56.5. I still went the over. I know I did the swerve again, but I still went the over. I think this team's ridiculous. I think Minnesota is going to be number 2 in defensive rating by the end of the year.
Yeah.
I think the Thunder are going to be number 1. I think this is going to be the best defense in the league by a mile. This might be the best defense we've seen in a very long time. There are no weak spots if they choose not to have them. And not only are there no weak spots, there's multiple looks that they can get to where they still have 5+ defenders to elite defenders on the court at all times. So you have all that. You have a star ascending in Shea. You have another star ascending in Jalen Williams, and then another star ascending in Chet Holmgren. They have every kind of lineup that you need to beat any kind of team in the league. They're still young enough where you don't expect those health issues to start creeping in. Yeah, this team's going to win a ton of games.
Yeah, you swerved on me, and I thought you were about to go the under in West. You surprised me every time. Phoenix Suns up next, 47.5. Over is at -105. Under is at -115. Again, you can find all these at BetMGM. So go to that app right now. Use bonus code JustBasketball. Another one at the West I think I'm staying away from. 49 wins a year ago. 50.6 was a 51-win team if you round up based on the numbers. Where are you at on Phoenix?
I'm going over.
Okay.
I'm going over on 47.5. I think this team can flirt with 50 wins this year. I just think these teams, I'm not super high on Phoenix's ceiling as a contender, but that's not the question here. The question is how many regular seasons are they going to win? And teams like the Suns just tend to win regular season games. Like last year wasn't even a good year for them, and they still won 49 games. Then they add Tyus Jones, they add Mike Budenholzer. Both of those guys are going to help them win more games during the regular season, right? Like the biggest problem with Phoenix last year was they threw away a lot of possessions, and they lost a lot of games because they wasted a lot of possessions, especially in the fourth quarter and things like that. Having Tyus Jones and, by the way, Monty Morris, 2 of the best assist-to-turnover ratio guys over the last decade on their roster is going to clean a lot of that up. Mike Budenholzer, for as rigid as he is, and there's faults that come with that in the playoffs, that rigidness, that structure, that infrastructure that he's able to establish during the regular season wins games, right? Like Mike Budenholzer rolls out of bed and wins 50 games a year. I feel pretty good about them going over.
Yeah, I lean over as well. I think just they have the talent where you think it's going to do it. You have Bud. I think we're in the same spot with them. Next one, Wes, is a little, also I think pretty direct. The Portland Trailblazers, 22.5 wins.
Under.
Smash in the under. Like this
is almost a lock.
This is gonna. I think this is by far the worst team in the conference. I think this is in running for the worst team in basketball. I think it's like them or Washington. I think are the two worst teams this year, and it will not be close. Even I'm betting this in real life. This is on my list of ones that I feel most confident in. I agree with you. It feels close to a lock, if not a lock. I think this is like an 18-win team.
Yeah, I think people might be scared by, wow, 22. You can't win 23 games. And look at the roster. I don't think that roster can win 23 games.
What they win? 18, 21 last year.
21 last year.
18. They were an 18-win team based on their net rating.
Yeah, so they outperformed. They outperformed.
Yeah,
and not only that,
they have the third best win differential according to the Cleaning the Glass. Third best win differential based on their point spread. That's their ass. This team's ass.
Also, 22.5 is not that low. 5 teams came under 22.5 last year, so it's not that bad. But yeah, I don't know what this team did to get like significantly better, right? Like I like Denny Avdia. I like that addition for them. I also am projecting a Jeremy Grant trade at some point when Joe Cronin decides that he doesn't want 3 first-round picks or whatever he's asking for Jeremy Grant. Feels like some team's going to pay up a first-round pick and they'll fold for it. So projecting all of that, I like Scoot Henderson. I don't think he's a very good basketball player right now. He would have to take some sort of incredible leap. Him or like Shaedon Sharpe or one of these. They could also trade Anthony Simons, who might be the best player on the roster right now. But something's got to give there for somebody's got to pop in a real meaningful way for them to clear this over. So I feel pretty good about them going under.
Yeah, that's. I think you can take that one home. There's nothing I can talk. I tried to for all these. I tried to if I thought my initial thought, do the research, and then try to like reverse engineer the other outcome.
Couldn't get there.
Could not get close.
Nope.
Sacramento Kings up next. 46.5. Overs at plus 100. Unders at minus 120. And Wes, I'm gonna go under here. It's just that's like too high to me. I don't. It's not that I don't think I think this team has the makings of like a lesser version of these regular season wins machines we're talking about because of the offensive talent. Because Sabonis, Fox, DeRozan is just buckets. DeRozan has been one of the most clutch players in the league the last several years. Fox as well. Like they are just going to be able to score on anybody. Flip that over though. I think this is going to be just a really, really bad defense with Fox, with Sabonis and DeRozan on the floor together. I don't really know how you build a team that can get to 47, 48 wins with a defense that was 18th last year, and I think probably is going to be a little bit worse this year when you throw in DeMar into that. I just think this is a slight under for me at 46.5.
Yeah, so they won 46 games last year, 48 the year before that. So Vegas knows what it's doing by putting this at 46.5. That's like right in the Sacramento Kings sweet spot. If you hit the under because they win 46 games, like then you win, and that might be right where they end up. I didn't have a good
43 win team by the numbers last year for what that is worth.
Yeah, I think you're probably going to be right, although I'm going the over on this. I just think
Vince Carter loyalty, is that where this is coming from?
No, I think when I think about teams that win a lot of games, it tends to be teams that have their best players available for most of the season. And De'Aaron Fox, Domantas Sabonis, DeMar DeRozan, those guys play a lot of games. Like all those guys are available for 70-plus games pretty much every year. I think Keegan Murray is going to take a little leap here. I'm a big Keegan Murray guy. I think Mike Brown's a really good coach.
Yep.
Kevin Huerter quietly had a really bad year last season. I think he's just going to be a little bit better, and that can help space the floor and kind of open up some of those linemen. I don't know. I'm going over. I don't feel great about it. I think their guys are going to be so healthy and so available that this is a team that just ends up winning games. And they have two guys like in close games, DeMar DeRozan and De'Aaron Fox, who are some of the best clutch players in the league. So they're going to kind of steal half a dozen games anyway that they probably shouldn't have won anyway. So I'll go over on them. But again, I think you're probably right. But I just didn't feel good about going under.
Yeah, just something feels a little there to me on that number. So I lean a little bit under. If it was like 47.5, if it was like one win more on the over under, would you go under on that? Is it like this just like the range that kind of tempts you on this?
That was not the assignment.
Okay, that's fine. You can.
I'm not gonna give that up.
That's fine. I respect that. All right, Spurs up next. 36.5. Overs at minus 115. Unders at minus 105. Wes, I'm going the under. I'm not. It's not that I don't think Victor Wembanyama is going to be incredible. That Chris Paul is going to make them better. Is this team 14.5 wins better than they were a year ago?
15. They got to be 15 wins better.
I can't do math. I went to journalism school at a public school in Ohio for a reason. like this team is going to be better. They're going to be more functional, but they're not going to be 15 wins better. I'm going the under.
I really wanted to. My initial thought was under, and then I kept working on it, and I'm like, God damn, I think I'm going over on this, and I hate myself for it because I didn't want to give into the hype because there's people saying that Spurs are going to be a playoff team. Now, 36.5 is low enough where they could still clear the over and not be a playoff team, and I think that's where the sweet spot is for the Spurs. I think they're going to win more games than 36.5, but I don't think they're quite going to be in that play-in mix. And I think they could be the Houston Rockets of last year, where the Rockets went basically from 21, 22 wins to 41 wins. You could do it in 1 year if you kind of have that transcendent talent, which Victor Wembanyama certainly is, and I think Rockets fans would argue somebody like Alperen Sengun is. And then you add some veteran help that makes a lot of sense that fits on the roster. Fred VanVleet, Dillon Brooks for Houston, Chris Paul, Harrison Barnes for San Antonio. Now, the depth chart is not as strong as the Houston Rockets depth chart. But my argument there is that Wembanyama is way better than anybody the Rockets have. They were 11-16 after the All-Star break when Wembanyama really settled in and when they kind of figured out how they wanted to play. 11-16. That is a little bit less than I think that 36.5 win pace. But then you add Chris Paul and Harrison Barnes. Can they kind of get there? I think so. I'm also baking in here Victor Wembanyama getting better as the season goes on. Like we could see another post All-Star game stretch here from Wemby where this team just rattles off, 12 straight wins or something, or goes like 15-3 in an 18-game stretch or something. So my initial thought was with you. I'm like, we're all too high on the Spurs, pump the brakes a little bit, but I'm like, no, I'll go over, but not by a lot. Not by a lot, but I'll go over.
If this was the East, I would go over and it wouldn't be a thought. But I think about the West, and you pointed out like there was only a couple. There were four really bad teams last year. The Jazz, the Grizzlies were destroyed by injuries, and thus pretty bad and didn't matter. The Spurs at 22 wins, and the Blazers. There's two bad teams this year. The Grizzlies we think are gonna take a step forward. Like I just don't think there are just like a ton of easy wins being in the West. That is also part of my calculus here.
Totally fair.
All right, last one. Utah Jazz. 29.5 wins. The over is at plus 100, and the under is at minus 120. And I think, Wes, can I guess that we're both going under on this?
We're both going under. Although I don't feel awesome about it. Utah won 31 games last year, 37 the year before that. Always with bad rosters. Will Hardy's a good coach. Larry Markkanen's a great player. There's enough talent here. And if you maybe like, hey, Walker Kessler kind of bounces back. I went under just because it feels like the West is so top heavy that like they could just kind of be forced down. But it wouldn't shock me if they won like 30 or 31 again and they kind of cleared the over here. But I went under.
Yeah, I think this is a stay away for me. If I'm thinking about this from betting, I think like 31 is very possible. The over is like that's a tempting value play to say the Jazz are going to win 31 games and at plus.
Yeah, do you have the actual odds in front of you, like the value on?
Yeah, plus 100 is the over.
And what's the under?
Minus 120.
If you're gonna bet on it, go over.
Like the over has more upside. Like I think it's very possible. I think this also just feels like a team that could do some real good work to be ready for the draft next year and go after Cooper Flag, go after this. Just feels like a team that just shuts it down in March, and it's just like we're Colin Sexton's got a twisted ankle, Keontae George is banged up,
or traded.
Yeah,
right. Like Danny Ainge is going to be going. Like I think Danny Ainge is going to be more motivated because this is what he's done the last 2 years. He always sells off a part or two at the deadline, so that's sort of where I ended up too. Is I'm going to go on. I'm going to hedge the under because I feel like Utah would prefer to go under than over.
Yeah, I agree. All right, Wes, I'll ask you this as we get out of here. What's your favorite? What's aside from the Thunder? Because I think we talked about them in detail, and we've gotten a lot of love. Which of these are you most confident in? If you look at what you said here. Which of these you're like, okay, I feel like I nailed this one the most, that I believe the most in as we go forward?
It's actually the one we disagreed on. I feel really good about the Pelicans going under 46.5 wins.
Okay, I think that's right. I think I'm there on the Warriors. I think I've kind of just feel like the Warriors at 44.5 just feels like an over that I like. But there's a lot that I like. There's just like a lot of teams that I feel like we know what they are in the West. It's just about positioning and luck and things that we can't really foresee as of September 24th.
My other sort of 3 locks were Dallas over, Memphis over, and Minnesota over. And if my strategy, if I were really betting on all this stuff, is I got 1, 2, 3, I've got 5 teams winning 50+ games. If I just bet the over on all 5 and I'm wrong on one of them, I'm still coming out in the green, right? So, I if I had to pick other locks, I like Dallas a lot on the over, and I like Minnesota quite a bit on the over.
Yeah, and last thing I'll say for me, if I'm looking at these, the the Blazers under is probably the other one I feel the most confident, as we discussed. There's a couple that I think the Pelicans one, even if I'm tempted by it, I'm scared by it. I'm scared of being wrong about Wemby and him ascending this year. Like that's another one that scares me. But this one was when I've done preliminary look at the East compared to the East. I found the West a little easier to sort through than I do figuring out exactly where some of these lines are in the East. And of course, obviously, we're like Vegas is undefeated at proving us wrong that we know jack shit about anything in terms of how these things break. But I felt a little bit more secure in the West. I also would say I would bet you if we saw like BetMGM's like tickets on over unders. You called this out, so I want to give you credit for this. Grizzlies over is probably going to be the most popular bet I think anybody makes on over unders this year.
Get it in now.
Yeah, for the odds, even odds on that feels pretty solid to me. But let's end there. I'm Chris Manning. That's Wes Goldberg. This was West over unders. We'll do East coming up, but next week we're going to do awards. Next week will be a 1-episode week. I am recording it ahead of time. I'm traveling to the great state of Utah to see some family for a week. I'll be working remote. There won't be recording while I'm there, so we're going to do an awards episode ahead of time, and we'll do some awards odds and talk through some of the awards pictures on the big NBA awards for next year. So MVP, Defensive Player of the Year, Coach of the Year, 6 minute. Wes, can we just not do 6 man of the year? Can we just opt out of that one?
Why?
Okay, I just like, are we guessing who scores more points? You can talk. Your job is going to be to make me interested in 6 man of the year, so we'll do that.
Done.
But all right, I'll talk to you. We'll talk to y'all soon. Have a great week.